Hey, what's up guys, Murgaman4 here, back with another Doctor Who video. It's been a long time since I did one of these, but Doctor Who Series 11 starts next week, in just under a week's time. I'm lucky enough to actually have the opportunity to go and see the Series 11 premiere at the movie theater. I'm going the Monday after it airs, so Doctor Who's now airing on Sundays instead of Saturdays, and I'm going to go to the theater the next day after that. So I'm going to have a bit of a tough time avoiding spoilers. Unfortunately, a couple times I've been to the theater before. I haven't done a good job at avoiding spoilers with The Day of the Doctor and then Twice Upon a Time more recently. I'm going to do my best to avoid those this time, but pre-Series 11, this has a lot, and I mean a lot, of big changes. This is easily one of the biggest shakeups that the show has ever gone through. Potentially, probably the biggest, aside from the show being brought back in 2005, and easily the biggest that I've experienced since I started watching, since I didn't become a fan until the Moffat era was already underway. But this upcoming season we have new companions, new Doctor, new showrunner, completely new writers, new TARDIS, new sonic screwdriver, new theme music and title sequence, and even entirely new monsters. So, over the course of the next couple of videos, I'm just going to be discussing some of my thoughts going into this series, because it's just going to be so vastly different. And then, after the series airs, I can kind of compare how I was feeling before and after. So, why don't we begin? Okay, so this part of my discussion is going to focus more on the behind-the-scenes stuff that's going on, rather than some of the things that we're actually going to see on screen. Now, some of these things are going to be directly, linked into that, like the main cast. I'll end up talking about my thoughts on the characters that they'll be playing as well. But other than that, I'm mainly going to be saving the rest of the plot-based stuff for the next video. First off, I want to talk about the writers, mainly Chris Chibnall. So, he was announced as showrunner, the new showrunner, a couple of years ago now. I think it was early 2016 that he was announced, and now here we are in late 2018. My thoughts on this haven't really changed too much, mainly, of course, because we haven't had the opportunity to see him showrun Doctor Who yet, but I'm feeling pretty optimistic about it overall. I have never loved Chibnall as a writer, at least for Who. Doctor Who's the only thing I've ever seen him written for, so I can't speak for his writing abilities in other shows or his showrunning abilities that I've heard about on Broadchurch. I can't speak for that. I'm not the biggest fan of his Who episodes. I find The Power of Three to be pretty poor. 42 is relatively mediocre. I do enjoy Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, and I do actually quite like The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, but he's never written anything that's better than quite like, in my opinion. But there are a number of factors that are involved with this. First off, Chibnall has always had to write for another showrunner, so he's never been his own boss. He's always been following somebody else's orders, other people's requests. And I know, at least during the RTD era, but I also assume during the Moffat era as well, that the scripts are often heavily rewritten by the showrunners. I recall hearing a statement that during RTD's time on the show, Moffat is the only writer that he never touched his scripts, but everyone else, he would rewrite the scripts himself. So Chibnall's RTD episode, I think 42 is the only one that he wrote for that. Who knows how much of that was actually Chibnall. And then in terms of Moffat's episodes, I feel like probably a similar kind of thing happened. I also remember a similar kind of statement. During the Capaldi era, Stephen Moffat started to take more co-writing credits, and I believe that's because he kind of got fed up with people giving other writers credit for things that he had written, but he wasn't the credited writer in the episode. So he started taking more co-writing credits. Of course, because he didn't have any co-writing credits, I don't believe, before Series 8. We don't know which of these episodes he heavily rewrote, but it's entirely possible that both The Power of Three and Dinosaurs on a Spaceship and Hungry Earth and Cold Blood were heavily written by him. So I don't really think it's fair to be prejudging him as showrunner based off his past episodes, because who knows how much of it was actually his writing. But now as showrunner, he's got free reign. He's got pretty much complete control. He can do whatever he wants. And I feel like this is actually going to make his writing better. And I'm optimistic for that. I haven't been a fan of his episodes in the past, but who knows? As showrunner, he could be great. And it's been 6 years since his last episode aired on television for Doctor Who. So he's also probably had time to, mature and grow as a writer. And so I am pretty much optimistic to what he's going to do with the show. Now, with other writers, we also have 4 other writers. I don't really have any familiarity with any of them except for Mallory Blackman, and I only know her for a short story that she wrote for the 7th Doctor as part of the 11 Doctors, 11 Stories collection. And I read that, but I don't know anything else about her work or the other writers' work, so I can't really speak to any of their abilities or whether or not I've enjoyed any of their past works. What I do think is really interesting, though, is aside from Chibnall, this is the first series, aside from Series 1 of the new series, that hasn't had a returning writer. Which, in one way, is disappointing because there are definitely writers I'd love to come back, particularly Jamie Matheson. Interestingly, though, I know that there are a couple of past writers who were asked to come back. And actually, here's the thing. In general, too, there's all this new stuff coming in, but Chibnall wasn't intentionally getting rid of all the old stuff. I know not just with the writers, but in other cases, too, like with Peter Capaldi. He was asked to stay on. And then there are a couple of other returning writers. I think either Sarah Dollard or Jamie Matheson, one of those two, and Mark Gatiss. I know that they were each asked to write an episode, but they declined either because of work, other workloads, or I think in Mark Gatiss's case, he just felt like it was his time to leave the show along with Moffat. But Chibnall isn't purposefully going for a completely clean slate. It's just panned out this way. And even though I might miss some returning writers, I am excited to see what some new writers can do with the show. And maybe these writers will now become future recurring writers for the Chibnall era. We did have a couple of writers who were consistent across Peter Capaldi's years as the Doctor. We had Peter Harness and Jamie Matheson, who both wrote episodes in all 3 of his series, and who wrote their first episodes for the show in his first series. So maybe these are some new recurring writers that we'll get, which is pretty great. And another thing I want to mention too is, so of these other writers, we have 2 who are women and 2 who are men, and we also have 2 black writers, which it surprised me to know this, but I didn't realize that Doctor Who had never had a black writer for television until now. In 55 years, that just seems crazy to me. I had never realized that. But my concern is, and of course people are going to be rolling their eyes now, but diversity is good, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that diversity should overtake quality. We haven't seen their work yet, so once again, I can't judge. I only hope that these people weren't chosen because of certain qualities, like they were women or because they were black, and that they were chosen because they genuinely were the best of the best. Because to me, true equality is when you don't perform the same kind of discrimination against somebody else, because it is the same kind of thing. Yes, white males have historically had more opportunities, but true equality comes from putting us on a level playing field and not bashing the other people down because they were higher up before. That's not what equality is about, at least not to me. And I just hope that these people weren't chosen because they were women or because they were black over somebody who is, say, a white male. Because for me, I would rather somebody who's a better writer who's a white male than someone who's a worse writer, even if they're still good, who's a black female. Because I want the best of the best quality. But that just remains to be seen. I know that's not a popular opinion, but that is my opinion, and I want to get it out there. And if these writers are genuinely the best choices, then that's awesome, and I'm really happy about that. But if they're not, then I am slightly disappointed. But I'm going into it with an open mind, and we'll just have to wait and see what the quality of their episodes is like. Because again, I have no prior experience with any of these writers. We also have a new composer. For the first time in New Who, someone other than Murray Gold is going to be scoring these episodes. And this is really exciting because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Murray Gold. He has done some amazing work for the series. But he has been working on the show for 12 years. And as much as I like somebody doing a certain role, whether it be making the music, or writing the episodes, or even playing a character, I like when it gets changed up every once in a while. There is a point where you can overstay your welcome, even if you continue to create some great works. And I'm not necessarily saying Murray Gold did outstay his welcome, but I am saying that I'm not necessarily sad to see him go, because he's been in the role for so long and has done so much for the show already. Our new composer is Segun Akinola. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And it's just going to be really interesting to be able to see, or hear rather, his new take on the music in Doctor Who. We've got a tiny little taste of it. They released a brief promo clip from the first episode of the series, and it was just a minute, so really not much to go off of, but it's certainly more subtle than Murray Gold's stuff, which in some cases is definitely a good thing. But I've listened to some of his works on SoundCloud before, and I mean, I don't know if his work on Doctor Who is going to be particularly similar to that or not. If it is, I mean, he's clearly a very talented composer, and I'm excited to see what a fresh mind will be able to bring to the music of Doctor Who, particularly the Doctor Who theme tune. Obviously, we haven't heard it yet, the episode hasn't gone out, and we may not even hear it in the first episode, although I think that people saying we won't are blowing it a bit out of proportion, because Chibnall said that we will not see the opening sequence in situ, which means in its original place. I assume we'll still get end credits of some sort at least, which would presumably include Segun Akinola's new version of the theme. So I think we'll hear at least some of the theme in the first episode. But what's exciting to me is that he stated that he's gone back to the roots of the 1963 theme and actually used samples from that original version of the theme and modernized it. And I'm excited to see what this take is going to be, because Murray Gold did the same kind of thing for the 2005 theme when the show came back. I don't know if he used the original samples or just took inspiration from it, but it's very clearly a modern orchestral version of the original Doctor Who theme with lots of, new instruments on top. And I'm really curious to see how Segun Akinola tackles this same kind of idea. We'll have a little under a week to find out, but I'm excited for that, and I do love the original theme, so I have a feeling I'm going to really like this. And now we come to the big ones. We have our main cast for Series 11. Of course, we have Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, our first female Doctor. I have heavily expressed my thoughts on this before, particularly when she was originally cast a little over a year ago. I made 3 videos on that. I have mellowed out a little bit since then. I'm less against it than I was back then, and I wouldn't say I'm against it now, but I also wouldn't say that I'm on board. I'm more of a little bit more of an indifferent mind, in that I wouldn't care if the Doctor never became a female, and I don't think it's a huge deal that the Doctor is a woman, but I still struggle with the idea of the changing gender. That's the main thing, which I also talked about way back when she was originally cast. I don't so much have a problem with a female Doctor, just gender changing in general, and I've said this since she was cast, but I would have just as much of an issue with a female Time Lord changing into a male Time Lord. So, for example, if they brought back Romana and cast her as a male, I would have just as much of an issue with that. It's not about the gender, it's about the change itself. I don't know. It's now that I've had over a year to let it sink in, I've become more used to it, and mainly my biggest issue now is just with how fans and non-fans react to it. Either, well, basically just the extreme responses on either side. You have the people who absolutely hate the idea and for some reason won't even bother to give it a chance simply because the gender's changed, which I do think is ridiculous. I may not love the change, but I'm perfectly willing to give it a chance. And I don't think in any way that it's an inherently bad decision. I don't think, it depends on how you use that decision. And it remains to be seen, but from what I've seen of Series 11 so far, I think it's probably going to be okay. But you also have the extremes on the other side who cannot fathom anything less than positivity in any other way than being sexist. Like, even if you just say, I have some concerns, you're immediately, labeled as a sexist, or like, people attack you for it, and I don't know, it's just not a pleasant environment to be in. And I'm going to voice a couple other my concerns with the female doctor here. Again, it's not really of the gender itself, but how the gender could be used. If the show uses it as a political platform to just constantly be saying women are awesome, women are great, which they are, but if it's doing that over telling a good story, and if that doesn't come naturally from the story, if it interrupts the story in any way, basically, then I'm not a fan of it. If it's used as a political platform over entertainment, or over telling a strong story, or creating good characters, then I have an issue with it. Given relatively recent stuff that's been revealed about Series 11, I don't have too many concerns anymore. I do think it's still a possibility, but I think it's probably going to be fine. It's been stated that the scripts were actually originally written for a male doctor because the writers began writing their drafts before they were told who the next doctor was going to be, which gives me some encouragement. Obviously, they will have been tweaked, but that does indicate that none of them have any sort of vital importance to the doctor being a woman, which is good, and that's how it shouldn't be that way. I don't think any script should focus on the doctor's gender, whether it be male or female. Of course, if some sort of plot calls for it, if it makes more sense for the gender to come into play, for example, in a past period where women were more discriminated against, I think that makes sense, because it would be more problematic in my eyes to misrepresent history. It'd kind of be like when the doctor has a black companion, say Martha or Bill, and they just completely acted like racism didn't exist. I think that's a problem. It shouldn't be ignored, it should be acknowledged and be used as a teaching moment. At the same time, it shouldn't overtake the story. It shouldn't be the story. It should be an aspect. It could be an added detail, but it shouldn't necessarily be what the story is about. And because these scripts were originally written for a male doctor, I can't imagine that any of these stories are about that, which is a good thing. Another thing that's alleviated some of my concerns is the clip that they released. Now, here's the thing. It did leak about 3 months ago, and they've only released it a couple days ago. I'll admit, I saw it when it leaked, and in all honesty, it's probably the best piece of promotional material I've seen from Series 11. She just clicked as the doctor, and the gender is mentioned, but skirted over really quick. Great kind of reaction to it. One of the new companions calls her Madam, and she is confused, and she's like, oh, does it suit me? Which is a great way to deal with it, and then they just move on with it. Which is no more different to how any other doctor might react to their change in appearance, which is just the way to handle it. So that gives me some huge encouragement. And there's also been repeated statements as well that her gender won't be a focus. So all of this, a lot of this more recent stuff within the past couple of months has given me more encouragement. And can't talk about the Doctor without talking about the new companions either, because we have 3. This is the first time that we've had 3 companions, I think since the 80s, with the Tegan, Nyssa, Adric, and 5th Doctor combination. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure. At least long-term companions. Because all of these companions are appearing throughout Series 11, and as far as it sounds and looks, they all have pretty equal roles overall. So we have Yasmin, Ryan, and Graham. So Yasmin and Ryan are both younger, and they are both minorities. Ryan is black, and Yasmin is, I think, from Asian descent, and Graham is an older man. And I honestly don't really have too many thoughts on Ryan and Yasmin. I don't know, their demographic, I guess it's more standard for a Doctor Who companion, younger person, especially Yasmin, younger and a woman. Ryan a little bit less conventional, but the most unconventional, and the one that interests me the most, is Graham, because we have an older companion. And I think, aside from maybe Evelyn Smythe in the audio dramas, Graham might be the oldest longer-term companion the Doctor has had, which really excites me because, well, for one thing, it's a change of pace from what we normally get. We, in the first place, rarely get male companions, at least who are of equal importance to the female companion, at least not in New Who. And we definitely never get older companions. I think the oldest companion we've had, in New Who at least, is Nardole, and he's in his 40s, I think Matt Lucas is in his 40s. And Graham is played by Bradley Walsh, who's in his 60s, maybe? I don't know the exact age, but I know from pre-air reviews of episode 1 that he is actually playing Ryan's step-grandfather. And so this should be an interesting dynamic because we've also never really had that kind of dynamic before between a grandson and a grandfather. That's an interesting new relationship to be able to explore. I'm not sure how Yasmin fits into this, but it's going to be great to see how these characters all come together and meet the Doctor. And I'm just excited to see these new characters and shaking up the basic formula of companions for once. My one disappointment is all of these people do come from contemporary Earth, which, it's disappointing. Nardole is the closest we've gotten to the classic era style of companion. Now don't get me wrong, a decent amount of companions in the classic era were from contemporary Earth as well, but we did have a lot more variety then, and I'm still longing for a main companion who is either from a different time period or from a different planet. Now, I would consider Nardole a main companion, but he wasn't the main companion. He was a side companion to Bill's main companion. So I am slightly disappointed we're still not getting that. It's possible that it's the BBC that's vetoing this, because I know that Clara was originally supposed to be from Victorian times, as she originally appeared in The Snowmen, but the BBC wouldn't allow it. So it's possible that it's them holding back, but they've seemed to be pretty open to all of Chibnall's suggestions. I know that he said that he had some demands that he didn't expect the BBC to accept or be okay with, but they gave him the okay on, I think, all of them, he said. Or at least most of them. Enough to make him happy. So, I don't know. Maybe they would be more lenient to this in the future. Who knows? I'm still hoping. Someday. But as it stands, this is looking to be a pretty interesting TARDIS team. We've got people of all different ages, different races, and different backgrounds to explore, so this is going to be really interesting, especially with the amount of main characters that we have. I know that Chibnall's writing is usually more character-based, so I think this is going to be a really interesting story that's told across Series 11. And yeah, I think that's probably about it for the behind-the-scenes aspect of the stuff I want to talk about. Next I'm going to be talking about more of the plot-based stuff and all the promotion for the new series, like the trailers and everything, which I haven't given my thoughts to. And yeah, so I guess that's it for now. These have been my thoughts on some of the behind-the-scenes changes that are going on before Series 11. After Series 11, we'll see what I'm thinking about all these people who have worked on this new series, and whether this series was a success with them or a failure, which, quite frankly, I think it's much more likely to be a success. But yeah, so time to move on to everything else.